In this lesson, we'll introduce another hook that is available in the React library, and it is called useEffect. As a reminder, a hook is a function that allows us to hook into existing React functionality. More specifically, React functionality that exists within class components that we now need to replicate within functional components. So the useState hook allows us to hook into the idea of component state, which is data that changes over time. And similarly, the useEffect hook is designed to solve a problem from class components, but now within the ecosystem of a React functional component. So what does the useEffect hook help us with? It handles side effects. And just to provide a definition, a side effect is just an extra operation or an extra procedure that the component needs to do outside of rendering, right? So for example, when we learned about component lifecycle methods in the previous section, we learned about the component didMount lifecycle method, and we used that as an opportunity to make an API request. An API request is an example of a side effect. It is something that the component needs to do outside of its regular rendering responsibilities, outside of its regular responsibility of returning some JSX to display on the screen. So in the class component approach, we put those side effects in lifecycle methods like component didMount or component didUpdate. And in React functional components, for any kind of side effects, such as making API requests, we do that logic using the useEffect hook. The way it works is the useEffect hook accepts a function as its first argument, and React will automatically run that function that we pass to the useEffect hook after the component initially renders. So in that regard, useEffect is similar or comparable to component didMount. However, it's not quite the same thing because the interesting thing about useEffect is that the function that we pass to that hook actually has the potential to run multiple times. There are different scenarios under which it may run repeatedly. So in that case, it's not quite like component didMount. It's kind of like a combination of component didMount as well as component didUpdate, as well as some other lifecycle methods that we have yet to explore. The point is that it can run once, but it also has the potential to run multiple times, including on things like state change. So it's kind of packaging up a lot of the former lifecycle method functionality, but into a single hook. And the way that we're going to customize when it runs is by providing some additional arguments after the initial function, that is the first argument that specifies what should happen, right? So once again, we pass the function and that tells React that it's going to run it at least once after the initial component render, and then we customize whether we want it to run additional times afterwards. And don't worry, we're going to talk about all of those scenarios step by step and the specific problems that they are intended to solve, all right? The final thing worth noting is we can use the useEffect hook multiple times in a component, the exact same way that we can use the useState hook multiple times. So if, for example, you have two side effects, maybe, for example, you want to make a request to an API, and then you also want to read some file from the user's file system, for example. If they're two independent operations, the best thing to do is to use the useEffect hook twice. So there's no limit to how many times you can utilize it, just like useState. But for the purposes of organization, what the function that you pass to useEffect should represent is a single independent operation, a single independent side effect, something the component needs to do besides rendering that we need to perform in order to get some kind of functionality working, such as getting, for example, data from an API. That's not the only example, by the way, of what we can do as an example of a side effect, but it's one example that should just get our brain juices flowing. All right, so this is a quick introduction to the useEffect hook, and in the next lesson, we'll see it in action within our code editor. So I will see you there.